RMJ Movie Reviews back again with just a reaction to the news that they are filming Bad Boys 3 with the title I believe being Bad Boys for Life. I'm not crazy about that title. I think they should just call it Bad Boys 3, but whatever. I mean, I guess they're doing, whatever, Blade Trinity and some other movies that changed the title when they got to number 3. Plus the fact I don't know how many years it's been, but I guess they don't want to confuse people. Anybody who probably don't even remember Bad Boys will probably be people my age and up. But either way, I I just saw there's a photo that just was leaked with Will and Martin. Just a publicity photo. It doesn't mean anything. What are my feelings about Bad Boys for Life? I think I did a video on this a couple years ago before they had even started filming, but I just reiterate because it's somewhere in my library somewhere. Who knows? But I just reiterate again. The original Bad Boys, when it came out, first of all, I just want to say I think they waited entirely too long because let's take a look at the timeline, people. When the first Bad Boys came out, I was 13 years old in the 7th grade in middle school. Martin had his TV show and Will Smith was on The Fresh Prince. Obviously, for someone my age, it was, and my other friends who we were in gym class and stuff, we were so excited about Bad Boys. We all saw it. We all loved it. And look, and I still really like Bad Boys, the first one, a lot. Upon rewatching the movie over the years, obviously, is it a good movie in terms of storytelling and all that? No. But Michael Bay admits to that even on the commentary. But what it is it's just dumb fun. It's two young guys who were starting the beginning of their careers, and they worked really hard. And it was a very low budget film, according to Michael Bay. I don't remember what he said the budget was. I think he said the budget was like $15 million, and I think ultimately he said what they had to work with was $9 million. So the way that movie came out and the way it looks is pretty good for a movie that small. And it was a hit when it came out. I think it made like $60 million or 70. Well, we got to think, y'all, this is 1995. So inflation, I don't know what 60 or 70 million would come out to now. But that was a pretty big profit. And also, they still came out good because if you got a $15 million budget, you make 70 million or whatever it is. I mean, you still coming out really good. And apparently Michael Bay said in the commentary that he wasn't getting any support from the studio. I think he said the only people who really believed in that movie was Don Simpson, rest in peace, and Jerry Bruckheimer. And I think, according to the commentary, I think even Don Simpson wasn't really too hot on the movie. The movie was supposed to originally star, I don't know, you guys, if you can even believe this, Dana Carvey and John Lovitz were supposed to star in Bad Boys 1. I can't even possibly even conceive of who thought that was a good idea, but I think that does show a big indication that drugs are very prevalent in Hollywood, because no person with a clear, sober mind can even think that that's a good idea for this genre. But I digress. But anyway, nobody believed in that movie. It was basically the three of those guys out there, and you can see in that movie, it's a very on the fly type of movie. I mean, it's beautifully shot. That's one thing. As much as people hate Michael Bay now, in the very beginning of his career back in the '90s, I mean, his movies were Bad Boys 1 and The Rock, and I'll say Armageddon, and even as much as people hate Pearl Harbor, those movies are beautifully shot. I mean, I love the way Bad Boys 1 looks. I'm not as crazy about the color scheme of The Rock because The Rock takes place in a prison, so that's a little bit colder. Colors a little darker blues. Bad Boys is more warm and hot and tropical, and I like that a lot more. And in particular, what I like in Bad Boys 1, I love the way that chase scene between the I think it's the Porsche and I don't know what kind of car that was. It's a Cobra or something like that. I don't know. I love the way that was shot. Beautifully shot. And Mark Messina's score, which was missing from the second movie, which really ticked me off because I'm a stickler for continuity between sequels. But anyway, Will and Martin's chemistry was on point. It was a well shot movie. It had great music. It had a great villain in Taishi Carey. I can't know his name. Who was in the original La Femme Nikita. He was in Kiss of the Dragon. He's a very intense and great villain. He's a very threatening. Um, and Will and Martin were improv in a lot of the movie, and their comedy. That's what I love, is that a lot of their comedy in that first movie, it was so, Martin in particular was very energetic and on the fly, and Will and them, it just really had a great chemistry in that movie. Um, the second film, I'm really might in a small group of people, probably me and the critics. I do not like Bad Boys 2. I don't like Bad Boys 2 at all. I didn't like it when it came out, and when that film came out, I was 21 years old. So, you see the timeline. First one came out when I was 13. The second one came out when I was 21. But I did not like Bad Boys 2 at all. And I still don't like Bad Boys 2. I don't like that movie. I think it's a very, it's a bloated movie. It's too long. It's way too long. One of the reasons I also don't like the movie too is that Martin looks very tired in that movie. He just looks he's very sluggish in that movie. He's just not, when you watch him in the first one, and I understand the age difference. I understand the first one, him and Will were like 28, 29, 30 in that movie. And, by the time they made the later one, they were like almost 40. I think I'm about the age they were in the second movie, but I still feel like my energy is still pretty high. So, but I just, Martin was just very sluggish in that movie, and he just looked very bloated and tired. And Will Smith, I kind of felt like was really kind of steamrolling him a lot in that movie. Because Will Smith had just done Ali, so, physically, physically his body was on another level, and Will was just really had been doing much more bigger projects than Martin had been doing at that time. Martin had been doing I don't know if Big Mama's House had come out yet at that time. Maybe that was a couple years later, but Martin was doing like a lot of Black Knight and National Security and all those kind of just silly, inconsequential type of movies. So, I don't know if I think the one movie he did with John Leguizamo and Danny DeVito, What's the Worst That Could Happen, which John Leguizamo, digressing, had a lot to say about in his book about Martin on that movie. Apparently Martin was a little bit afraid that Leguizamo was going to outshine him and try to take away a lot of the good lines, allegedly, in John Leguizamo's book. I'm not quoting it. But anyway, I just felt Will Smith steamrolled Martin in that movie, and I just didn't feel comedically they were in the same level. I just felt like Will was here and Martin was here, and I just didn't like it. I thought the movie was overly mean-spirited, And look, guys, look, I like graphic horror films. I like The Devil's Rejects. Here's my thing. I like my share of hardcore, gritty, violent action pictures. I do love that. My issue with Bad Boys 2 is that everything just is too much. Too much. There's a lot of cheap gags type of humor. Like there's a scene where you got two rats having sex. Why is that? Martin and Will Smith are such brilliant comedians. You don't need a cheap gag like that. There's a scene where you've got two gay men, and they're dressed like women, and they're like, "Oh, he is so nice." That is a cheap gag, and that whole style of the overly flamboyant, what's going on, girlfriend, and all that. By 2003, that was played out. That was something of the early 90s. That's something you would have seen with Men on Film, on In Living Color. And that's an early 90s style of humor. And it was well done in the early 90s. By the time 2003 came, it was played out. And also the way they did it in Bad Boys 3 was not even well done. It was just cheap. The cheap comedic gags. And let me get on to the overuse of the graphic violence. There's a lot of things in the movie. I'm perfectly fine with the, Will Smith splattering people's brains and all that, and you shoot the KKK guy in the throat and all that. That's cool stuff. I'm fine with that. I think what turned me off in particular in Bad Boys 2 was the necrophilia stuff. I just felt there was no place. There was just no place for that in the movie. I don't even know why it was even there. Now, we can compare. You look at John McTiernan movies, and I bring up John McTiernan or Paul Verhoeven, where they're gentlemen who shoot action very well in their films, which Michael Bay shoots action very well as well. And they have very heavy graphic violence. There's very heavy graphic violence in Die Hard 1, in Predator, and in Die Hard with a Vengeance. RoboCop and Total Recall have very graphic violence. The thing about those films is they're balanced out with very good filmmaking. So you have very good performances from Peter Weller, Kurtwood Smith, Ronnie Cox, Miguel Ferrero, a great soundtrack, very good filmmaking and storytelling to partial out the moments of graphic violence. So there's moments of graphic violence that are partial out very carefully. It's not just bloody brains, necrophilia, talking about having sex with dead women. And that's what Bad Boys 2 is. Total Recall. In terms of level of violence in Bad Boys 2, you can compare. They're on the same level. But again, you've got a satire type of humor to balance that out. You got great villains. Michael Ironside. Again, Ronnie Cox back. You got Sharon Stone. You've got a good balance of the storytelling and the acting and humor to release you from the graphic violence, right? Bad Boys 2 does not have good storytelling, good acting, in my opinion, from people who are capable of it. I don't even really particularly like the score for that movie. They didn't use Mark Mancina, and I still am not clear why he didn't do that movie, but I think it's a cardinal sin to do sequels when you don't bring the same composer over, or at least if the second composer takes over, bring in cues from the other movie. That just doesn't have continuity between the movies. I didn't like that. The overly mean-spirited scene where they intimidate the son, that there was no purpose in that scene. There was no purpose in that scene. Now, it would have made more sense if they would have introduced the boyfriend character earlier in the movie, and the kid was an a-hole, and he was like, oh, I'm a tough guy, and I'm sagging my pants and all that. Then it would have made sense later in the movie that Will and Martin did what they did to him. But as it stands in the movie, they just do it for no reason. And it's just like, why is this? It's just an overly cruel movie. There's the scene where like they bring the body chopped up in the table, and like they go in the kitchen, and there's blood all over the kitchen. And it's just so overly, exhaustingly cruel. There's a lot of really unnecessary racial stuff in it. That's one thing and one issue I take with Michael Bay's movies. Now, I like the first 48 Hours with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. That's a movie where there's a lot of racist humor in that movie. But one thing I'll say about 48 Hours is it's actually funny. It's actually funny, and it's done in a witty, banterous way. And also, Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte equally insult each other across the board. So as much as Eddie Murphy is digging in on Nolte, Nolte is digging in on Murphy, and vice versa. So as much as, Nick Nolte drops that N-bomb, but Eddie Murphy is getting back at him too. So that's the thing. It's played equally. The racial insults are equal. Michael Bay movies, I've heard him say on commentaries that he wants to put realness in his movies. So I guess his idea of realness is pretty much just black people acting ignorant. That's a reality of life, as is there's ignorant people from all races. I just kind of would like if maybe there was some cleverness or some sort of artistic art. Just do it in a way that it's actually funny and it's not cheap. And I just, they got the scene where the mom, the drug cartel's mom, is she a Negro? And then it's the the KKK thing in the beginning of the movie, and I tend to agree with Roger Ebert. I know some people get on Ebert and say he was like overly, you know, righteous and all that, but I agree with a lot of what he said in his review of Bad Boys 2. There's just a lot of unnecessarily racial things, and it's a bloated movie. And I really think a lot of the action sequences wear out their welcome too early. Now, I'm not gonna sit up here and say that I didn't get pumped off of some of the action, because the KKK sequence with Will Smith rolling, doing the Mel Gibson roll, shooting the guns, awesome. That freeway chase, fantastic, great. The only problem was that came in a half hour into the movie. When that freeway chase, that should have been at the end of the movie. That should have been the action sequence to close out the movie. Another issue I have with Bad Boys 2 is an imbalance of the action sequences. Digressing, I was listening to the commentary for Blade 2, and one thing that David Goyer talked about was how it's important in action films to build on your action scenes. So you give that nice little opening action kicker, give the audience a little taste for what they're gonna get, and your action is supposed to go here and here, and then by the end of the movie it's gonna be here, right? So it's supposed to go like this throughout the movie, right? Bad Boys 2 starts here, is a little bit here, and then the whole movie is just here, here, here. By the time excuse me, by the time you get to the finale, I'm exhausted. It's wore out my welcome. That ending finale in Cuba or wherever it was, I can't even remember, South America, I don't remember where it was at the mansion. I was just kind of over it. It kind of was a little bit cool. I kind of liked the Will and Martin running up the stairs in the military uniforms and shooting. Yeah, it was okay. But I really honestly think that it should have been 4 big action sequences in that movie. The KKK thing, the shootout in the Haitian apartment. I probably would say the last one probably should have been maybe the second chase with the dead bodies and the monorail. And then the movie should have closed out with that freeway chase, and that should have been it. And I think the movie would have been fine. But as it stands, it's I just think it's bloated. It's very mean spirited. It's overly violent. It's got cheap, unfunny jokes. Martin looks tired. I just really think it's a very awful movie. And I think it's very unpleasant to watch. I don't enjoy it at all when I watch it. Matter of fact, when I watch it, I own it now strictly because I like visually the way it looks. Like, I like the colors, and I like that freeway chase, and I like the KKK shootout, and I like the shootout in the apartment. But pretty much outside of those parts of the movie, I cannot sit and watch Bad Boys 2. I just can't. I really hate it. So, my excitement for Bad Boys 3 is not really there. I don't really have much hope in it. I'm probably a small opinion, but I really just feel like the first movie is the one that's great, and I don't know. I hope Will Smith. I'm happy Michael Bay is not directing this one, but I have paused because these gentlemen directing it, I've never heard of them before. Not saying that's good or bad, but I don't know how the movie's going to come out. It's coming out in January. That also gives me pause. Why is this movie coming out in January? January is a dead time of the year for movies. So I don't know about Bad Boys 3, man. I just don't know. I don't know. And I don't know how the action is going to look. I mean, one thing you give Michael Bay, if you just let Michael Bay come in and just direct action, and then you let somebody else direct the comedy and the character stuff, I think you'd be okay. But so those are my opinions on how I overall feel about the Bad Boys franchise and potentially this third movie. I think I talked more about 1 and 3, but I think it's any indication how I feel about number 2. I'm not very excited about 3. So those are my opinions on Bad Boys for Life. RMJ Movie Reviews. I'll see you soon.